the theme is how to create work-life balance. I like how when we said hello just now, most of you said, I'm busy, like everyone's busy, right? And I was talking about how busy is the new I'm fine. So what does work-life balance even mean? How do we think about this within our different varying industries where there's so much pressure? And of course, individually as well, because a lot of this starts with us. So how do we role model some of these behaviors ourselves? Any questions before we dive in? All good? Amazing. Well, Alex, I'll turn over to you to give some insights, then I'll complement that, and then we'll dive into discussion.
Great. Thanks, Petra. And so I thought today, in terms of the contribution that I could bring to the conversation, is really from the conversations that I'm having with clients and potential partners of Involve. And so this is obviously a very topical conversation, and a lot of companies are experiencing what we call burnout, in terms of actually having to deal with employees who are experiencing burnout, but actually are experimenting as well solutions that are going to cater to people's needs. So I'm just gonna talk about like a few of the kind of like highlights in terms of trends that I'm actually seeing in the space when we're talking about inclusion and diversity in the workplace. So I think in the first instance, when we talk about digital well-being and boundaries, I think the first solution in a way that comes to mind is actually about communicating openly about people's workloads, about expectations, but also about how to demonstrate the culture of the company. So yes, a lot of the times we like to, of course, as individuals within a company, we like to start with policies and procedures, and it's great that we have those, of course, as a reference, but they're only useful if they're being put into practice. And a lot of the times, or sometimes I should say, some leaders just don't necessarily role model the behaviors that we need to see. And that is a big problem, because when someone junior or someone who has just joined an organization sees a working pattern that is basically sending emails at whatever hour time of the day, a manager who never takes their leave, or very rarely, or never takes breaks, then that person is going to think that's the culture of the organization. So they're going to sometimes try to replicate the same behaviors because they think that's what's going to get them ahead at that company. So thankfully, more generations are trying to go against that trend, which is very good to see. But I think line managers and senior leaders, they have a responsibility to be role models for everyone else, to really make sure that they are setting the tone for the culture of the organization. So yeah, boundaries are necessary. We all have our own personal boundaries. So setting them and being clear about them actually gives freedom to then people within teams to actually say, these are mine. And I'm communicating about them as well. So that goes from, of course, as I mentioned, taking breaks, but also like flexible work arrangements, sorry. Flexible working schedules, whether that's working remotely, whether that's an option or not for the company, compressed work weeks for perhaps people who have a time in their lives where they really need to cater to their personal lives more than the professional lives. Having that flexibility really empowers employees to manage their time more effectively. So it's really important that we take that human element into those policies and processes as well, into the business space. So that's part of the kind of like communication type of conversation that we're having around culture. But another one that actually springs to mind is really the focus more on outcomes than an hour spent actually doing a work or a specific task. Basically moving away from a culture that measures success through the hours that are being worked, but actually just focus on the results. Is this getting done in a correct timeline that you deem, fair in terms of the allocation of time that you would give to that task, then great. You don't need to know what your colleague was doing for the other hour or whatever. They might have been reading something that actually sparked an idea, and then they got the work done in an hour rather than two. So yeah, I think we're starting to break away from like the traditional working patterns where you really had to be like you had to seem busy or look busy to actually make sure that you are efficient, you're being efficient. So yeah, respecting people's boundaries as much as possible if you can, discouraging after hours communication unless it's absolutely necessary, and really implementing those policies around, email etiquette, availability, and those boundaries, those personal boundaries. Of course, I realize that it's a lot more difficult in some sectors, Trina, as you've mentioned in the legal, banking sectors. It's incredibly hard to have those boundaries set. But I think in that case, we can't really say, okay, well, there's a one size fits all approach here. I think we really need to just take that human centric element and really try to understand what that person needs in order to be best in their job, in order to actually do their job at their best. So whether that person, needs support from other teams, whether that person needs to actually thrives by being around people or thrives by being exposed to like more senior individuals, actually finding environments that are going to allow the people to thrive is actually a way to say, okay, yeah, you're keeping busy, but be busy in the best way that you can, in the most productive way. Because I think that's the element that at least has come up with some of our clients when it comes to the legal sector. We've done a few DI assessments where the employees were very, very open about that pressure actually that they feel. And so also, like, from the different parts of the business, when you have, of course, the lawyers on the one hand, but also the back office on the other hand, who also feel like they have their own sets of problems of like not being considered as important as everyone else. So those are themes that come up consistently, but I think that we're making progress just by opening the conversations already and saying, okay, we're here, we're trying to fix. I don't like to use the word fix, but improve the culture. So we need people to be actively partaking in these conversations and listen to their needs and how they think we could find solutions that are going to be useful to them. So of course, there are different generations. Of course, there are lots of elements that we have to take into account here. I know I've had a few conversations myself with like my father or some mentors in the past who seem to consider that burnout was a trend, and so people aren't as resilient. This generation, they're just not, they don't work hard enough, and they're not as resilient as we used to be. It's not fair. It's not the same environment as we had before. We're seeing such a mix of individuals coming into the workplace in terms of experiences and backgrounds, and thankfully a more diverse workforce. So in terms of also connectivity, we're always on. Like, if you wanted to, you could be on your phone 24/7 and be looking at your work email and Slack and whatever messaging you use for work. And it's just it brings on a level or a layer of stress that is just something that I don't think the previous generations have experienced in a way. And I might be wrong. They might have had their own kind of like ways, of course, additional ways of experiencing stress. But yeah, that is definitely a conversation that I've found quite interesting myself on a personal note. So yeah, I think in terms of that communication piece, we're trying as much as possible to encourage people managers and people leaders to really have the conversations, to actually create psychologically safe environments for people to come up and actually tell them and talk openly about when they're hopefully not when they're struggling already, but when they foresee that they might be struggling, so that they can put in place a plan to mitigate that stress and that overload. So I think in that sense, like awareness programs, trainings are incredibly important for people managers. Sometimes they get to their levels because they're very good at what they do and not necessarily have the people skills that go with it. And sometimes that can be very detrimental. I worked in the recruitment space for a few years, and that was definitely the case where a lot of the managers weren't people managers. They were great at what they were doing, so that's how they got like more senior roles. But that human element was a missing piece, and I'm sure that's the case in a lot of sectors. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of like bring up all of these conversations that I've been having with different clients in terms of the conversation as well. I don't think we realize how much, or I don't think some leaders, sorry, realize how much our personal lives nowadays they intersect with our professional lives. So there are themes such as like the cost of living, or being a carer, being a parent nowadays, or personal circumstances that can really affect people's sense of resilience and really people's energy levels when they come into work. So again, open and honest conversations here, they can allow people to feel safe to bring up, okay, right now I'm having a real difficult time at home, so can this project be spread across the team, because right now I'm not going to manage to deliver it on my own. So I think in terms of that humility to also be a leader and say yourself sometimes when you're struggling. I know I have a 16-month-old baby at home, and when I came back to work, it was a little bit overwhelming. So actually being open about that with my team and saying, hey, I know I said I would review this before the end of the week. I'm just not, I can't, haven't had any sleep in the past 4 days, and I just need that extra time to be able to do this. And of course, doing this with your teams, but also with your leaders, and managing the expectations and saying, okay, being really true and open about what you're experiencing. I think that's really what I'm trying to convey here. And of course, I'm speaking from my own personal experience here, but I know people who also are being triggered in their day to day by online events, by things that happen and that go online, like conflicts, Black Lives Matter, transphobia, you name it, sexism all over the place. I mean, we are much more aware of all those issues than we used to be. So they do lead also to some digital overwhelm at one point. And I feel like it can distract people from work as well. So some leaders need to really, I mean, leaders in general need to really think about how external issues can be affecting employees. And rather than just ignoring, the news, actually opening conversation, saying, okay, I've noticed this has been happening in the news. Like, how does that make you feel? Like, is there anything we can do to support? Is really just a very empathetic way to just lead your teams and really be open and create that open space where people are going to be a lot more keen to share what it is that is worrying them and stressing them eventually as well. So yeah, especially the newer generations, kind of like Gen Z, millennials, are much more likely to be plugged into those issues. So we need to be mindful of this in the workplace, that these conversations are happening daily. So yeah. Some people have the privilege to tune out to these conversations, and they think that by not saying anything that they're not hurting the environment. It's not hurting it, but it's not helping either. So when you're a leader, you're trying to improve, I think, people's lives and the teams and the business as a whole, and that is not a way to do it, just to tune it out and pretend like everything's fine. So yeah, just here I've kind of like talked for a while here, but I just thought I'd share some of the insights that our clients have been talking about.
Amazing. Thank you, Alex. I'll spend a couple minutes just building on that and throwing a few things at you that may be useful. But I love that you're talking about the realities of the geopolitical conditions, the digital overwhelm, all these different elements that perhaps weren't there before. And the psychological safety that needs to underpin any kind of tactics. Because sometimes we go in with our tactics, but if you don't have the psychological safety underneath, and also sometimes we'll do talks or training about like the theory of psychological safety, but not actually understand the daily practice. Like, what are the daily habits of trust building? And I think leaders sometimes think that it's just going upwards. I'm building trust, and not realizing that if you don't handle certain things well, you erode trust, right? So you've now taken 5 steps backwards that you need to kind of claw back. And every time you get a new person in a team or a different change, it's another element where you've got to kind of recalibrate what your safety feels like, right? You mentioned a little bit about just digital overwhelm, and I think there's probably some nuance, Alex, just to build on the piece where like shutting it all off or tuning in, because I think if you turn it all on, it's just a lot, right? And there's fake news and there's all the things that could be overwhelming and less useful. But then I agree with the idea of, well, we need to stay informed, but where are we getting our information from? What time of day? How often, right? Should I just, Alex, would you agree with that piece?
Yeah, absolutely.
So just
Absolutely.
finding that nuance. So I would second what Alex is saying is like, how do we just normalize conversations about well-being linked to performance? When I perform well, I turn off my distractions in order to focus and to access fully creative time. I've been back in the background writing my second book, all about digital well-being. What a mammoth task that was, because just the amount of research of what is going on. So I would recommend to you the book Stolen Focus by Johan Hari if you want some of the science and the backup of kind of our attention and how that's affecting us. And then also the Center for Humane Technology. Are you guys familiar with the Center for Humane Technology? No, check it out. There's two videos on there by the guy who founded it. One on AI, which is astronomically interesting. I know, Trina, when I went to your event, there was a woman talking about AI in law. Do you remember the other speaker? And I was like blown away by just the detail that she had
Mm.
about how it was going to change your industry specifically, right? And that's going to show up in every industry in different ways. So not only are we navigating the workload, because on engagement surveys, that's the biggest buzzword at the moment is like workload, workload, workload. But work is changing. So the whole world of work is evolving, and we need to instill a kind of sense of adventure and experimentation with our teams, which is, hey, we don't know what the next 5, 10 years is going to look like. And yet we are part of something that is about massive change. So how can we evolve together and talk about it in those terms rather than, oh my God, have you heard about AI, sorry, and all the things that are happening? So there's this kind of fear narrative that is going through the system that is affecting everyone. And you guys are all in slightly varied industries, but I think that people component, the fear, oh my God, what's going to happen next? Whether we say it or not, it's in our nervous system, right? So that's how it's affecting us. And to the point around workload, let's talk about meeting culture and like the massive inefficiencies that are actually going on in the workplace, you know? And whenever I do talks and I bring up meeting culture these days, everyone goes, and there's statistics around this. I think it's 70% of people say they will be happier if they didn't have to attend so many meetings. And so a few pointers are they still fit for purpose, or have they just been layering on since the pandemic? Let's do more of this, like a next kind of patchwork of kind of each patch is like, let's do more of stuff rather than, well, what can we take away? What can we do less of? So how can we make our working days more efficient? And that has to do with digital distraction and too many people being involved in every communication side of things. So being able to streamline comms. And I think this applies to the mental health component and the DEI component, because I see in big companies, I know some of you have dual roles, But I see that sometimes they're quite siloed, right? So, and even competing for budget, right? In order to create initiatives or effective change. And just think of the overwhelm that does for the people on the ground when they have, here's this initiative, here's this initiative, here's this initiative, you know, rather than kind of streamlining it all strategically. So we want in meeting culture, we want to think about the purpose, how long it is, are there alternatives, and which people need to be involved. Those are kind of the four pieces I would use to assess it. And sometimes within HR, we do great one-to-ones and we encourage managers to have great one-to-one conversations. Like, hey, we check in with our people, we have one-to-ones. And I think it's crucial for psychological safety to translate some of those deeper conversations on a team level, right? Because that's where we kind of go, oh, other people are in the same boat. And that's when we grow that resilience together so that when the tough times come, we're like, I got your back, I've got your back. If all of those conversations have been done in secret or in the shadows or outsourced out of the business to a helpline, when the tough times come, you do not know how to back each other up. Does that make sense? So just a few things to think about. A lot of people are lonely, isolated, and haven't quite figured out how hybrid work can be effective. We have very strong policies in many of your businesses, which are 3 days in the office, 2 days in whatever it is, right? But when people do come into the office, there is very limited intention about how we can connect together, right? So instead, we go into offices and we're all on Teams meetings, right? And nobody feels any better. In fact, I'm just building up resentment because I had to commute and life is so expensive, but I feel just as isolated as ever. So we need to create those spaces where we talk about burnout, where we talk about boundaries. Those are the rich conversations where we can then create what I call positive accountability in the workplace. So we're not just talking about, are you struggling? We're talking about, hey, how do you invest in yourself on a daily basis? What do you do to bring you joy? What do you do to be your best self? Do you put focus time in your calendar to be your most creative self, right? So we want to open those conversations because, I mean, in my team, we're 100% flex. We just have a 1 hour meeting a week that everyone has to attend. That's it. If you want to work early, if you want to work late, like everything's fine. It's your responsibility because you are an adult to manage your working day. But we've had clear conversations about what that looks like for different people. And of course, we're a small business, but it's that level of openness that is crucial. Two more things, and then let's just stop the recording and open the floor to questions, discussion, comments. We're talking about work-life balance. I don't know if you've seen different posts around, it's not work-life balance, it's work-life harmony or other kind of buzzwords to make it like okay to work your weekends or something. I don't know what the vibe is, but the reality is we need a shared language about these different themes. So when burnout became a thing, there's a great book called Burnout: How to Solve Your Stress Cycle, and we can send some of these resources links to you. When that came out and I read it, I literally posted a copy to everyone in my team. And again, we have a small team, so that was a small budget. It's not the same for all of you. We had a book club. We all read about it, and then we discussed it. And we said, hey, which bits have affected you? Which bits should we watch out for as a team? How do we understand this shared language? And so in the book, they talk about completing your stress cycle. So they say burnout is stress that stacks up in your body that hasn't had a way to release. And it releases through physical activity, through laughter, through connection, it's a physiological thing. And so now it's normal in our business to say, how are you completing your stress cycle today? I'm going for a walk. I'm going to connect with a friend. So do you see how it's an uplifting conversation about good mental health and performance, not just when you're struggling? And to add to that, when someone is struggling, it's easy to bring it up because we've normalized this conversation so much, right? And finally, just watch out, and you guys will know what I'm talking about, for what I call the PR version of well-being and DEI. It relates to that as well. The PR version, which is we've got great policies, we've got great benefits. We did a manager session. It was at our annual conference agenda. And then that's as far as it goes, right? And so good start. But what we want to excite our leaders and managers and individuals about is like, what is the one small thing that is in your sphere of influence each day. That way, everybody becomes responsible for culture, for their own mental health, because it's their responsibility, and then organizational responsibility as well.